Daniel Morrison stood perfectly still at his post outside the throne room, his red uniform immaculate and his expression unreadable. To everyone who passed by, he was just another royal guard, one of hundreds who protected the palace and royal family with quiet efficiency. Palace staff barely noticed him anymore after his 12 years of service, treating him like part of the furniture. What they didn't know was that Daniel had a secret that would soon change everything. The morning started like any other. Daniel arrived at the palace gates at 6 a.m. sharp, went through security checks, and took his assigned position in the East Wing corridor. He watched ministers and advisors hurry past with important documents, listened to servants gossip about royal schedules, and maintained the perfect posture that had been drilled into him during training. But today was different. Today, Daniel carried a letter in his inside pocket that could alter the course of history. The letter had arrived at his modest London flat 3 days ago, bearing an official seal he recognized, but had never expected to see on his personal mail. The return address made his hands shake as he opened it. The Nobel Prize Committee, Stockholm, Sweden. "Dear Dr. Morrison," it began, and Daniel had to read those words 3 times before they sank in. Nobody at the palace knew about his doctorate. Nobody knew about the research he conducted in his spare time, the late nights spent in his tiny apartment laboratory, or the scientific breakthrough that had taken him 15 years to achieve too. His colleagues, Daniel Morrison was just a reliable guard who never caused trouble, never asked for promotions, and seemed content to stand in corridors for the rest of his life. They had no idea that behind his quiet exterior lay one of the most brilliant scientific minds of his generation. The secret had started in childhood. Daniel's father was a coal miner who died of lung disease when Daniel was 12. His mother worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, leaving Daniel to care for his younger sister while dreaming of a different life. Science became his escape. While other kids played football, Daniel conducted chemistry experiments in their garage using equipment bought with money from his part-time job at the local grocery store. His teachers noticed his talent and encouraged him to apply for university scholarships at 18. Daniel earned a full scholarship to Cambridge University to study biochemistry. His professors were amazed by his natural ability and original thinking. "You could revolutionize medicine," Dr. Patricia Williamson had told him during his final year. "The world needs minds like yours," but life had other plans. During his final semester, his mother was diagnosed with early-onset dementia. Daniel faced an impossible choice: pursue his scientific dreams or care for the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. There was no real choice at all. He graduated with highest honors but turned down graduate school opportunities to move back home. The Royal Guard position offered steady income, health benefits for his mother's care, and a schedule that allowed him to continue his research privately. For 12 years, Daniel lived 2 completely separate lives. By day, he stood guard in palace corridors, protecting royalty and maintaining order. By night, he worked in his converted garage laboratory, searching for a cure for the disease that was slowly stealing his mother's memories. His colleagues thought he was unmarried and antisocial because he never joined them for drinks or social events. They didn't know he rushed home every evening to check on his mother, help her with medication, and then work until dawn on research that might save millions of lives. The breakthrough came 6 months ago during one of his longest nights in the laboratory. Daniel had been testing a new compound that could potentially reverse the protein buildup in dementia patients' brains. The initial results were so promising that he couldn't believe them. He ran the tests again and again, each time getting the same incredible outcome. His compound didn't just slow dementia progression, it actually reversed it. In laboratory mice, brain function improved dramatically within weeks. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a treatment. It was potentially a cure for one of humanity's most devastating diseases. Daniel had quietly published his findings in a respected medical journal. Using his full credentials, Dr. Daniel Morrison, Ph.D. in biochemistry, Cambridge University. Scientific community was buzzing with excitement about the mysterious researcher who had achieved what thousands of others had failed to accomplish. Now the Nobel Prize Committee was recognizing his work with medicine's highest honor. The ceremony was scheduled for next month in Stockholm, and the whole world would finally learn that the man who discovered a cure for dementia was a humble royal guard who had never given up on his dream. As Daniel stood at his post that morning, the letter burning in his pocket, he wondered how he would tell his supervisor that he needed time off to accept the Nobel Prize. The conversation would certainly be interesting. A senior palace administrator walked past, barely glancing at the guard who had just changed the world. Daniel smiled slightly, imagining the man's reaction when he learned the truth. Tomorrow, everything would be different. Commander Richard Hayes was having his usual morning tea when Daniel knocked on his office door. Hayes had supervised palace security for 15 years and prided himself on knowing every guard under his command. Daniel Morrison was reliable, punctual, and invisible, exactly what a good guard should be. "Come in, Morrison," Hayes called, not looking up from his duty rosters. "What is it?" "Sir, I need to request leave for December 10th through 15th, Daniel said formally, standing at attention. "December 10th? Hayes frowned, consulting his calendar. It's very short notice. "What's the emergency?" Daniel had rehearsed this moment in his mind dozens of times, but now the words felt impossible to say. "I need to travel to Stockholm, sir, for a ceremony." "What kind of ceremony requires 5 days in Sweden?" Hayes finally looked up, studying Daniel's face for clues. Daniel took a deep breath and pulled the letter from his pocket. "I've been awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine, sir. The ceremony is in Stockholm." The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds as Hayes stared at his guard, waiting for the punchline of what had to be an elaborate joke. When none came, he reached for the letter with shaking hands. "This is impossible," Hayes whispered, reading. "The official Nobel Committee letterhead. You're a palace guard. You don't have a medical degree." "Actually, sir, I have a PhD in biochemistry from Cambridge. I've been conducting research in my spare time for the past 12 years, Hayes read the letter twice more before setting it down carefully. "Dr. Daniel Morrison," he said slowly, as if testing how the words sounded. "You're telling me that one of my guards has been secretly curing diseases? Just one disease, sir?" "I've developed a treatment that reverses dementia progression. Nobel Committee is recognizing the work as a breakthrough that could help millions of patients worldwide." The commander's face went through several emotions: disbelief, confusion, and finally something approaching. "Why didn't you tell anyone? Why work as a guard when you could have been in a research laboratory?" Daniel's expression grew sad. "My mother has dementia, sir. This job provided health insurance for her care and flexible enough hours for me to continue my research. I needed both the steady income and the freedom to work on finding a cure." Hayes leaned back in his chair, struggling to process this information. In 15 years of command, he had never encountered anything remotely like this situation. "Let me understand this correctly. You've been standing guard in our corridors, while simultaneously conducting Nobel Prize-winning medical research?" "Yes, sir. I converted my garage into a laboratory and worked nights after my shifts here. It took 12 years, but I finally found a compound that reverses the protein damage in dementia patients' brains." The commander stood and walked to his window, looking out at the palace grounds where Daniel had walked his patrols for over a decade. "Do you realize what this means? You're going to be one of the most famous scientists in the world. Why haven't you quit the guard already?" Because I gave my word when I took this position," Daniel replied simply. "I don't break commitments lightly, sir. I wanted to discuss this with you first before making any decisions about my future." Hayes turned back to face him, seeing Daniel with completely new eyes. This wasn't just a reliable guard anymore. This was a man who had potentially saved millions of lives while maintaining perfect military discipline and never seeking attention or special treatment. "Morrison, ... Dr. Morrison," Hayes corrected himself. "This is the most extraordinary thing I've encountered in my entire career. How did you manage to keep this secret for so long?" "I'm good at being invisible, sir. It's what makes a good guard." Laughed, despite himself. "Good at being invisible. You've just become the most visible person in the scientific world. The media is going to go absolutely mad when they learn about this." Daniel nodded grimly. "That's what worries me, sir. I never wanted fame or attention. I just wanted to help my mother and others like her. Now everything will change. Change how? People will want interviews. Universities will offer positions. Pharmaceutical companies will want to buy my research. The quiet life I've built here will be over. Hayes sat back down, realizing the full magnitude of what his guard was facing. What do you want to do? Daniel was quiet for a moment, considering his options. I want to accept the Nobel Prize because it will bring attention to dementia research and help other scientists build on my work. But after that, I'm not sure. This palace has been my home for 12 years. The routine, the purpose, the service, it's given structure to my life while I worked on the cure. You could have any research position in the world now, Hayes pointed out. Major universities, government laboratories, private companies worth billions. Why would you want to stay here? Because this is where I learned that serving others gives life meaning, Daniel replied. Whether I'm protecting the royal family or protecting humanity from disease, the principle is the same. I serve something greater than myself. Hayes shook his head in amazement. Dr. Morrison, you are either the most humble genius I've ever met or completely insane. Perhaps both, sir, Daniel smiled. Will you approve my leave request? Word of Daniel's secret identity spread through the palace like wildfire. By afternoon, every guard, servant, and administrator knew that the quiet man who had stood in their corridors for 12 years was actually a Nobel Prize-winning scientist. The revelation sent shockwaves through the entire royal household. Lady Catherine Pemberton, the Queen's senior private secretary, summoned Daniel to her office within hours of Hayes reporting the news. She was a formidable woman in her 60s who had served the royal family for 30 years and thought she had seen everything. Dr. Morrison, she began, the title feeling strange on her tongue. I must admit, in 3 decades of palace service, this is the most unusual situation I've encountered. Daniel stood at attention, unsure whether he was in trouble or being congratulated. Yes, ma'am. Sit down, please. This conversation requires a more ... informal approach. Lady Catherine studied him carefully as he took a chair. Help me understand. Something. You've essentially been living a double life for over a decade. Why, it wasn't intentional deception, ma'am. When I applied for the guard position, I provided my full educational credentials. Perhaps the information was overlooked during processing. Lady Catherine consulted a thick file on her desk. Your application listed a biochemistry degree from Cambridge, but not the PhD, and certainly nothing about ongoing medical research. I finished my doctorate through part-time study after joining the Guard. The research began as a personal project to help my mother. I never imagined it would lead to anything significant enough to warrant Nobel recognition. You never imagined? Lady Catherine's eyebrows rose. You discovered a cure for dementia and thought it wasn't significant. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I mean, I hoped it would help patients, but I'm not naturally ambitious or attention-seeking. I prefer quiet work to public recognition. This explanation fascinated Lady Catherine, who was accustomed to dealing with people who craved spotlight and advancement. Dr. Morrison, do you realize that your discovery will make you one of the most sought-after scientists in the world? Universities will compete to hire you, governments will want to consult with you, and pharmaceutical companies will offer you fortunes for your research. I understand that, ma'am, but I'm not sure I want any of those things. What do you want, Daniel? Consider the question carefully. I want my mother to remember my name again. I want other families to avoid the pain mine has endured. And I want to continue serving in whatever way best helps the most people. Lady Catherine leaned forward, intrigued. Are you saying you might want to continue as a royal guard even after winning the Nobel Prize? I'm saying I haven't decided. Yet, this job has given my life structure and purpose while I worked on the cure. I'm not eager to abandon it for something uncertain. The senior private secretary made several phone calls over the next hour, speaking in hushed tones to various officials and advisors. Daniel waited in the corridor, aware that his future was being decided by people he had served but barely knew. Finally, Lady Catherine called him back into her office. Dr. Morrison, I've been authorized to offer you several options. First, you could resign from the Guard with full honors and pursue your scientific career wherever it leads. What are the other options? Second, you could take extended leave to fulfill your Nobel obligations and media commitments. then return to modified duties that accommodate your research work. Third, we could create an entirely new position for you, something that combines your security experience with your scientific expertise. Daniel was stunned. You would do that? Dr. Morrison, you've served the crown faithfully while secretly working to save millions of lives. That's exactly the kind of person we want associated with the royal family. Your discovery reflects well on everyone here. As they spoke, news of Daniel's identity was already leaking to the media. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters who had somehow obtained his number. Outside the palace, news vans were gathering as word spread about the royal guard who had won the Nobel Prize. The media attention will be intense, Lady Catherine warned. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny? Daniel thought about his mother, now living in a care facility where she rarely recognized him anymore. If it helps fund dementia research and gives hope to families dealing with this disease, I can handle whatever comes. There's something else you should know, Lady Catherine added. Majesty has requested a private audience with you tomorrow morning. She wants to personally congratulate you on your achievement. Daniel's composure finally cracked. In 12 years of service, he had never spoken directly to the Queen, only stood silently at his posts while she passed by. The thought of a personal audience was overwhelming. What should I say to her, ma'am? Lady Catherine smiled for the first time during their conversation. Just be yourself, Dr. Morrison. I suspect Her Majesty will be as impressed by your humility as she is by your scientific brilliance. That evening, Daniel returned to his small flat in a working-class neighborhood of London. The contrast between his two worlds had never been starker. Here, surrounded by his makeshift laboratory equipment and stacks of research papers, he felt like the scientist he truly was. At the palace, in his red uniform, he felt like the protector he had trained to be. Both identities were real. Both were important to him. And somehow he would have to figure out how to honor both as the world watched his every move. His phone rang again, another reporter wanting an interview. Daniel let it go to voicemail, just as he had with the previous. 47 calls that day. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tonight, he was still just a royal guard with a secret that was about to shake the world. The next morning, Daniel stood outside the Queen's private study in his perfectly pressed uniform, waiting for the most important conversation of his life. His hands were steady despite his nervousness. 12 years of Royal Guard training had taught him to remain calm under pressure, even when that pressure involved speaking to the monarch. Lady Catherine opened the door and gestured him inside. Dr. Morrison, Your Majesty. The Queen looked up from her desk with genuine warmth in her eyes. She was smaller than Daniel had expected from seeing her at formal ceremonies, but her presence filled the room completely. Please, sit down, Dr. Morrison. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Daniel perched on the edge of an antique chair, unsure whether to speak or wait for permission. The Queen noticed his discomfort and smiled. Relax, Dr. Morrison. Today you're here as a guest, not a guard. Oh. I want to hear about your remarkable achievement. She gestured to a newspaper on her desk with the headline, Palace Guard Wins Nobel Prize for Dementia Cure, Your Majesty. I hope this situation hasn't caused any embarrassment to the royal household. Daniel began carefully. Embarrassment? The Queen looked surprised. Dr. Morrison, you've brought honor to everyone associated with you. A member of my personal guard has potentially saved millions of lives. That reflects well on our ability to recognize quality in people. She leaned forward with genuine interest. Tell me about your research. What inspired you to pursue such difficult work while maintaining your duties here? Daniel's nervousness faded as he began explaining his mother's condition and his desperate search for a cure. The Queen listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about his methodology and the challenges he had faced working with limited resources. You conducted this research in your garage? She asked with amazement. Yes, Your Majesty. I couldn't afford a proper laboratory, so I improvised with equipment purchased over many years. The setup was basic, but it was enough to test my theories. You did this work after 12-hour shifts standing guard here. All those nights, yes. I rarely slept more than 4 hours, but the research was too important to delay. The Queen shook her head slowly. Dr. Morrison, I've met many scientists over the years, but none who combine such brilliant work with such personal sacrifice. Your dedication is extraordinary. She stood and walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens. I understand you're facing some difficult decisions about your future. The world will want you to leave the guard and focus entirely on your scientific career. Yes, Your Majesty. I've already received offers from Harvard, Oxford, and several major pharmaceutical companies. The money they're offering is more than I could earn in a lifetime as a guard. But you're hesitant to accept these offers. Why? Daniel struggled to put his feelings into words. This position has been my anchor for 12 years. It provided stability while I cared for my mother and pursued my research. The routine, the sense of purpose, the honor of serving the crown. These things have meaning beyond financial compensation. God. The Queen turned back to face him. Dr. Morrison, what if I told you that you could have both? That we could create a role allowing you to continue your research while maintaining your connection to royal service? How would that work, Your Majesty? We're prepared to establish a new position, Royal Scientific Advisor. You would continue receiving your guard's salary and benefits. But your duties would involve advising the crown on scientific matters and representing the royal family at international conferences and research symposiums. Daniel was speechless. The offer was beyond anything he had imagined possible. Furthermore, the Queen continued, we would provide funding for a proper laboratory and research assistance. Your work is too important to be limited by financial constraints, Your Majesty. I don't know what to say. This is incredibly generous. It's not generosity, Dr. Morrison. It's recognition of exceptional service and a desire to support work that benefits humanity. You've already proven that great things can be accomplished when brilliant minds are given the support they need. The Queen returned to her desk and picked up an ornate box. Before you give me your answer, I want you to have this. Inside the box was a medal unlike any Daniel had ever seen. A unique design combining the royal coat of arms with symbols representing science and medicine. This is the Order of Scientific Merit, created specifically for you, recognizes individuals who combine outstanding service to the crown with exceptional contributions to human knowledge. Daniel stared at the beautiful medal, overwhelmed by the honor. Your Majesty, you've created an entirely new award. Sometimes exceptional circumstances require exceptional responses. Dr. Morrison, you've shown that it's possible to serve Queen and country while serving all of humanity. That deserves special recognition. As the audience concluded, Daniel realized that his secret was about to become the most public story in the world. But with the Queen's support and the promise of continued purpose, he felt ready to face whatever came next. The story exploded across global media within hours of the Queen's announcement. Palace Guard wins Nobel Prize dominated headlines on every continent, with Daniel's photo appearing on front pages worldwide. The narrative was irresistible. A humble working-class guard who secretly cured one of humanity's most devastating diseases. News. Crews camped outside the palace gates, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man everyone was calling the Genius Guard. Social media buzzed with admiration for Daniel's humility and dedication. With hashtags like #GuardianGenius and #NobelGuard trending globally, Dr. Sarah Chen, neurologist at Johns Hopkins, who had been following Daniel's published research, flew to London specifically to meet him. She waited in the palace's visitor center, still amazed that the anonymous scientist whose work she had admired for months was a royal guard. Dr. Morrison, she said, when Daniel finally appeared, wearing civilian clothes instead of his uniform. Your research papers have been required reading in our neurology department for 6 months. I had no idea you were working alone in such conditions. Daniel felt uncomfortable with the attention, but Dr. Chen's genuine scientific enthusiasm put him at ease. I had advantages most researchers don't, he replied modestly. Unlimited time, no pressure to publish quickly, and personal motivation that kept me going through the difficult years. Personal motivation? My mother has dementia. Every failed experiment wasn't just a scientific setback, it was another day stolen from her memory. That urgency drove me to try approaches that others might have dismissed as too risky or unconventional. Dr. Chen nodded with understanding. The best medical breakthroughs often come from researchers with personal stakes in the outcome. But working in isolation for 12 years with no institutional support, that's unprecedented. As they talked, Daniel's phone buzzed with another call from a major pharmaceutical company. He had received dozens of similar calls over the past week, each offering astronomical sums for his research patents. "Are you going to sell your work?" Dr. Chen asked, noticing his phone. "Yes, that's the question everyone keeps asking," Daniel sighed. "The offers are staggering enough money to set up my own research institute and fund decades of additional work. But there's something that feels wrong about profiting from suffering." "What do you mean?" Daniel looked out at the palace gardens where he had walked countless patrols while developing his cure. "My mother's dementia isn't worth more than someone else's mother's dementia. If I sell to the highest bidder, this treatment might only be available to wealthy patients who can afford it." Dr. Chen was impressed by his ethical stance. "What are you considering instead?" "The Queen has offered to help me establish a foundation that would make the treatment available at cost to patients worldwide. No profit motive, just healing. It would mean giving up billions of dollars, but it feels right." Their conversation was interrupted by Commander Hayes, who approached with obvious pride in his former guard. "Dr. Morrison, I have someone here who wants to meet you." Behind Hayes stood a woman in her 70s with tears in her eyes. "Dr. Morrison, I'm Margaret Thornberry. My husband has dementia, and when I read about your cure in the newspaper..." She couldn't finish the sentence, overwhelmed with emotion. Daniel immediately stood and offered her a chair. "Please, Mrs. Thornberry, tell me about your husband. William was a mathematics professor for 40 years, the most brilliant man I ever knew. But for the past 3 years, he's been disappearing piece by piece. Some days he doesn't recognize me. Most days he can't remember our children's names." She pulled out a photo showing a distinguished gentleman in academic robes. The doctors said there was nothing they could do except make him comfortable while we watched him fade away. "But your discovery, does it mean there's hope?" Daniel knelt beside her chair, speaking gently. "Mrs. Thornberry, my treatment is still in clinical trials, but the early results are very promising. Patients have shown significant improvement in memory function and cognitive ability within weeks of beginning treatment. Would William be eligible for the trials?" "I'll make sure he is," Daniel promised. "In fact, Mrs. Thornberry, you've just helped me make the most important decision of my career." He turned to Dr. Chen and Commander Hayes. "I'm declining all commercial offers for my research. Instead, I'm establishing the Morrison Foundation to provide free treatment to dementia patients, regardless of their ability to pay." Double quotes, Dr. Chen smiled. "Broadly, Dr. Morrison, you really are going to change the world." "We all are," Daniel corrected. "This discovery is just the beginning. With proper funding and collaboration, we can tackle other neurological diseases. Parkinson's, ALS, Alzheimer's. There's so much work to be done." As the group talked about possibilities for future research, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine excitement about what lay ahead. For 12 years, he had worked in isolation, driven by desperation to save his mother. Now he could work with the world's best scientists, supported by royal backing, to save millions of families. Margaret Thornberry stood to leave, clutching Daniel's business card like a lifeline. "Dr. Morrison, you've given me hope for the first time in 3 years. Thank you." After she left, Daniel sat quietly for a moment, thinking about all the Margaret Thornberrys in the world who were watching their loved ones disappear to dementia. His secret life as a researcher was over, but his real work was just beginning. 6 months later, Daniel stood on the stage in Stockholm's concert hall, wearing his formal uniform as he accepted the Nobel Prize in Medicine. The audience of distinguished scientists, world leaders, and dignitaries rose in sustained applause. As he approached the podium to deliver his acceptance speech, "Your Majesties, distinguished members of the Nobel Committee, fellow scientists," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the magnificent hall, "I stand before you not as an individual achiever, but as a representative of everyone who refuses to accept that suffering is inevitable." In the audience, his mother sat in a wheelchair, her eyes bright and focused for the first time in years. The experimental treatment Daniel had developed was working slowly but unmistakably, bringing her back from the fog of dementia. Beside her, Sarah held her hand, both women beaming with pride at the man on stage. 12 years ago, I watched dementia steal my mother's memories, her personality, and eventually her recognition of the son who loved her. That personal tragedy became my scientific mission, proving that the most powerful discoveries often emerge from the deepest pain. Daniel's voice grew stronger as he continued. But this award doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to every family. Remember who provides care when hope seems lost? It belongs to every researcher who faces years of failure before achieving breakthrough. It belongs to every person who believes that science can triumph over suffering. He paused to look directly at his mother, whose face showed understanding and love. 3 weeks ago, my mother called me by name for the first time in 4 years. She asked about my work, remembered stories from my childhood, and told me she was proud of what I had accomplished. That moment was worth more than any prize or recognition. The audience was completely silent, moved by the raw emotion in Daniel's words. The Morrison Foundation has already begun providing free treatment to dementia patients worldwide. Within 5 years, we project that this therapy will be available in every major hospital and clinic on Earth. No family should lose their loved ones to a disease we now have the power to defeat. Daniel held up his Nobel medal, letting it catch the stage lights. This recognition comes with tremendous responsibility. Pledge that every resource, every opportunity, and every platform that comes from this honor will be dedicated to ending neurological diseases that rob families of their most precious memories. As he concluded his speech, the standing ovation lasted nearly 10 minutes. Colleagues he had met through his foundation work, scientists inspired by his dedication, and families whose lives had been saved by his discovery all joined in celebration after the ceremony. Daniel found himself surrounded by reporters asking about his future plans. The quiet guard who had hidden his identity for 12 years was now the most sought-after scientist in the world. "Dr. Morrison, will you be returning to your position as a Royal Guard?" asked a BBC journalist. Daniel smiled, adjusting his uniform proudly. "I serve the Crown in a new capacity now, as Royal Scientific Advisor. But I'll always be a guardian first. Now, I just protect humanity from disease instead of protecting royalty from physical threats." What's next for the Morrison Foundation? We're already working on treatments for Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, and several rare neurological conditions. The same principles that led to the dementia cure can be applied to other protein-based brain diseases. We have enough funding to work for decades. Later that evening, at the Nobel banquet, Daniel sat beside his mother as she enjoyed her first formal dinner in years. Her improvement continued daily, not just in memory, but in personality and independence. She was becoming herself again, proving that his years of sacrifice had been worthwhile. "I'm proud of you, Daniel," she said clearly, her eyes sharp with intelligence. "Your father would be amazed to see what you've accomplished." "I did it for you, ma'am. Everything I did was to bring you back." She patted his hand gently. "No, son. You did it because you have a good heart that couldn't stand seeing people suffer. That's the real reason you became both a guard and a scientist, to protect people from harm." As the evening concluded, Daniel received a text message from Commander Hayes back in London. "Congratulations. Dr. Morrison, your old post in the East Wing corridor misses you, but the world needs you more. Proud to have served alongside a true hero." Daniel looked around the glittering banquet hall, surrounded by Nobel laureates, world leaders, and scientific luminaries. A year ago, he had been invisible, standing guard in palace corridors while secretly working to save lives. Now he was at the center of global attention, his discovery changing medicine forever. But the most important moment wasn't the prize ceremony or the international recognition. It was seeing his mother's smile, bright and genuine, as she remembered who she was and who he was to her. The Royal Guard, who shocked the world, had kept his promise not just to protect and serve, but to never give up hope that tomorrow could be better than today. His secret was out, his mission was complete, and his real work was just beginning in the end. Daniel Morrison proved that true greatness often comes disguised as ordinary service. and that the most powerful discoveries emerge from the deepest love. He had saved his mother, his country's reputation, and millions of families worldwide, all while maintaining the quiet dignity of a man who simply refused to accept that some battles cannot be won